The heavy oak doors of the Old Bailey slammed shut behind her with a sound like a coffin lid. Briar Langford stood alone on the witness stand, her gloved hands trembling so violently she had to clutch the wooden rail just to stay upright. The year was 1818. London's most notorious courtroom pulsed with the heat of 1,000 eyes. From the packed galleries rose a low, venomous roar, hisses, whispers, and outright jeers that crashed over her like dirty waves. Traitor's daughter. Shame on the Langford's blood will tell each word sliced deeper than the last. Above her, the judge's bench loomed like a judgment throne. The mirrored reflector cast harsh light directly onto her pale face, exposing every flicker of pain, every unshed tear. No shadows to hide in, no mercy to be found. They wanted her to speak. They wanted her to condemn her own dead father. Briar drew in a shaky breath, the air thick with the scent of unwashed wool, candle smoke, and righteous fury. Her heart hammered so loudly, she feared the entire court could hear it. Only weeks ago, these same people had smiled at her across glittering ballrooms. They had praised her gentle voice, her graceful dancing, her quiet dignity. Now they looked at her as if she were something filthy, dragged in from the gutter. The prosecutor's voice rang out cold and precise. Miss Langford, you will tell this court the truth. Did your father, the late Sir Henry Langford, sell British military secrets to the French? Did he betray his king and his country? The question hung in the stale air like a noose. Briar's throat tightened. Memories flooded her father's warm laugh in their library, the way he used to kiss her forehead before bed, calling her his brave little star. How could she stand here and destroy the only man who had ever truly loved her? Her gaze darted desperately across the sea of faces. Not one friend. Not one ally. Even the few acquaintances who once sent her flowers now averted their eyes, afraid to be tainted by association. She was utterly, devastatingly alone. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. Not in front of these wolves dressed in silk and lace. The prosecutor leaned forward, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the room. Answer the question, Miss Langford, or the court will assume your silence is an admission of guilt. The gallery erupted again, louder this time, hungrier. Briar's knees threatened to buckle. Her mind screamed for escape, for anyone to step forward and stop this nightmare. But no one came. The judge lifted his gavel, its shadow falling across the stand like a death sentence waiting to drop. In that single suffocating moment, Briar Langford realized the cruel truth: society did not need proof to ruin a woman. All it needed was a whisper. And today, that whisper had become a scream. The gavel began its descent. The gavel hung suspended in the air for one impossible heartbeat. Then a voice cut through the chaos, deep, commanding, ice cold. I beg the court's indulgence. Every head snapped toward the galleries. A tall figure rose from the shadows of the noble section. Black coat, perfectly tailored shoulders, broad dark hair swept back from a face carved from winter itself. Ronan Ashford, the Duke of Ashwood, stepped forward with the quiet authority of a man who rarely needed to raise his voice. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. He moved with deliberate grace down the aisle, his polished boots echoing like distant thunder. When he reached the front, he stopped directly before the judge's bench and looked up, gray eyes, steady and unyielding. I wish to announce my engagement to Miss Briar Langford. Gasps exploded across the room like gunfire. Whispers turned into a roar. Briar's knees nearly gave way. She gripped the rail tighter, her knuckles white beneath her gloves. This couldn't be real. The Duke of Ashwood, the most powerful, most reclusive man in London, had never spoken more than 10 words to her in his life. Why now? Why her? The judge lowered his gavel, slowly frowning. Your Grace, This is highly irregular. Ronan didn't flinch. His voice remained calm, yet it carried to every corner of the Old Bailey. Nevertheless, it is the truth. Miss Langford has accepted my offer of marriage. As her future husband, I take full responsibility for her family's affairs. Any charges against her father's name will be settled under my protection. He turned his head and met Briar's wide, terrified eyes for the first time. In that single glance, something passed between them, a silent promise and a warning. The prosecutor sputtered, "Your Grace, you cannot simply 'I can,'" Ronan said quietly, dangerously. "And I have." He stepped closer to the witness stand until only the wooden barrier separated them. His presence was overwhelming, the faint scent of cedar and rain, the controlled power radiating from every line of his body. Briar's heart pounded so hard she could barely breathe. Ronan leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a low murmur meant only for her ears. "This is your only chance, Miss Langford. Marry me, and I will clear your father's name. I will restore your family's honor. But in return, you must become my wife in name and in public. You will help me move through society. There is a greater treason at work here, one far larger than your father's alleged crimes. I need eyes and ears only a wife can provide." Briar stared at him, her mind reeling. Marriage. To this stranger who looked at the world as if it were a chessboard and everyone else mere pieces. Terror clawed up her throat. She remembered the way society had turned on her in a single morning. She remembered her younger brother Kieran's frightened face when the creditors came knocking last week. She remembered her father's gentle smile, now forever stained by accusation. If she refused, everything would be lost. Her name, her brother's future, the last fragile scraps of her family's dignity. Ronan's eyes never left hers. For the briefest moment, his mask slipped just enough for her to glimpse something beneath the ice. Not warmth exactly, but resolve, and perhaps the faintest shadow of understanding. He whispered again, so softly only she could hear. "This is the only way to save not just your father's honor, but your brother Kieran as well. They will destroy him next if you fall." Briar's breath caught. Kieran, her little brother, only 17, already carrying the weight of their ruined name. She could not let him suffer the same fate. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks, silent burning. She looked at the sea of hostile faces, then back at the man standing before her like a dark savior, or a devil offering a contract written in shadows. Her voice came out barely above a whisper, trembling yet clear enough for the court to hear. "I accept." The words tasted like both salvation and chains. A ripple of shock swept through the gallery once more. Some looked furious, others intrigued. A few even smiled with cruel delight at the scandal unfolding before them. Ronan gave the slightest nod, almost imperceptible, then turned back to the judge. "The engagement stands. The charges against the Langford name will be withdrawn under my authority. This session is no longer necessary." The judge hesitated, clearly unsettled by the Duke's sheer presence, then struck his gavel with a sharp crack. Session adjourned, chaos erupted, but Briar barely heard it. She stood frozen on the witness stand as Ronan offered his arm. When her fingers touched the fine wool of his sleeve, a strange current passed through her, fear, desperation, and the tiniest, most dangerous spark of something she dared not name. As he led her through the parting crowd, Briar felt the weight of 1,000 stares burning into her back. She had just stepped off the edge of a cliff, and the man who caught her might be the one who would push her even further into the abyss. The heavy iron gates of Ashwood Manor creaked open like the jaws of some ancient beast. Briar sat rigid inside the ducal carriage, her hands folded so tightly in her lap that the seams of her gloves bit into her skin. The journey from the Old Bailey had passed in silence. Ronan had ridden ahead on horseback, leaving her alone with her swirling thoughts and the growing dread in her chest. When the carriage finally rolled to a stop in the vast courtyard, Briar looked up at the imposing stone facade. Towering gray walls, narrow windows that seemed to watch her every move, and ivy that clung like desperate fingers. Beautiful, yet undeniably cold. A footman helped her down. Her legs felt unsteady, as if the ground itself might swallow her. Ronan was already waiting at the top of the wide steps, his tall frame silhouetted against the fading afternoon light. "Welcome to Ashwood Manor, Miss Langford," he said quietly. His voice carried no warmth, only quiet formality. "From this moment forward, you are under my protection." Briar managed a small nod, but her throat was too tight for words. Before she could take another step, the grand doors swung open. Dowager Duchess Genevieve Ashford stood in the entrance like a queen on her throne. Silver hair swept back severely black silk gown, severe and unadorned, her sharp eyes cutting through Briar as if she were an insect pinned beneath glass, so the older woman said, her voice crisp and laced with frost. "This is the scandal you've brought into our house, Ronan." Briar felt the words land like ice water against her skin. Genevieve descended 2 steps, her gaze never leaving Briar's face. "A girl dragged from the witness stand, daughter of a suspected traitor. How very charitable of you, grandson. Or should I say desperate?" Briar's cheeks burned. She wanted to look away, to shrink back into the carriage and disappear. Instead, she lifted her chin, a small, trembling act of defiance. "Your Grace," she said softly, her voice steadier than she felt, "I did not ask for this arrangement. But I am here now, and I will not apologize for surviving." For the briefest second, something flickered in Genevieve's eyes, surprise perhaps before the mask of disdain returned. "We shall see how long that spirit lasts in this house." Ronan stepped forward, placing himself slightly between them. "Grandmother, that is enough. Briar is my fiancée. She will be treated with the respect due to her position." Genevieve gave a thin, humorless smile. "Position? She has none yet, my dear. Only the shadow of scandal clinging to her skirts." Before Briar could respond, a lighter set of footsteps echoed from inside. A young woman appeared beside the dowager, dark hair, like Ronan's, but with softer features and warm hazel eyes that held genuine curiosity rather than judgment. "Grandmother, please," she said gently, coming down the steps. "You'll frighten her away before she's even had tea." She reached out and took Briar's cold hands in her own. "I'm Celine Ashford, Ronan's sister. Please, don't mind, grandmother." She bites harder than she actually chews. A tiny, unexpected smile tugged at Briar's lips, despite everything. Celine's touch was the first bit of warmth she had felt all day. "Thank you," Briar whispered. Celine squeezed her hands once before letting go. "Come, let me show you to your rooms. You must be exhausted." As they walked through the grand halls, Briar's eyes widened at the opulence around her, crystal chandeliers, heavy velvet drapes, portraits of stern Ashford ancestors staring down in silent judgment. Yet, the air felt heavy, as though the house itself held its breath. That night, sleep refused to come. Briar paced the elegant guest chamber, her bare feet silent on the thick carpet. The fire in the hearth crackled softly, but it did little to chase away the chill inside her chest. She kept replaying the day, the courtroom, the gavel, Ronan's sudden declaration, the dowager's cutting words. What had she done? She had traded one cage for another. A soft knock sounded at the door. Briar froze. It was only a maid bringing warm milk, but the interruption left her even more restless. Hours later, unable to lie still, she slipped on a dressing gown and stepped into the dimly lit corridor. She needed air. She needed to think. Voices drifted from a half-open door at the end of the hall, low, urgent, masculine. Briar hesitated, her heart quickening. She should turn back. She knew she should. But something pulled her forward. She moved closer, pressing herself against the wall, barely daring to breathe. Inside the study, Ronan stood near the fireplace, his jacket discarded shirt sleeves rolled up. Across from him sat a middle-aged man with kind but weary eyes, Dr. Elias Hawthorne. "You're certain the symptoms matched?" Ronan asked, his voice tight with restrained emotion. Dr. Hawthorne nodded slowly. "The same as your brother's final days. The tremors, the sudden collapse. It was no ordinary fever, Your Grace. Someone ensured he would not wake up." Ronan's hand clenched around the mantelpiece until his knuckles turned white. Briar's breath caught in her throat. His brother, the previous heir. She had heard rumors of a tragic death years ago, but never details. Ronan's voice dropped even lower. "Then Edmund is moving faster than I thought. He wants the title and everything that comes with it. Briar is my shield. But if he discovers how much she already knows..." Dr. Hawthorne glanced toward the door. Briar pulled back sharply, heart hammering against her ribs. She fled down the corridor on silent feet, slipping back into her room and closing the door with trembling hands. Leaning against the wood, she pressed a hand to her mouth. Ronan hadn't just saved her. He was using her. A pawn in a deadly game against his own uncle, Lord Edmund Ashford. And now she had stumbled upon the first dangerous secret, the suspicious death of Ronan's older brother. Briar sank onto the edge of the bed, staring into the dying fire. Was the man who had pulled her from ruin her savior, or the devil who had just dragged her deeper into hell? The weeks that followed blurred into a whirlwind of silk gowns and whispered conversations. Briar found herself standing beside Ronan at one glittering event after another, ballrooms filled with candlelight and laughter that never quite reached her heart. She smiled when required, danced when asked, and listened carefully to every conversation Ronan quietly directed her toward. Each night she returned to Ashwood Manor, exhausted, her mind heavy with fragments of secrets and half-heard truths. On a stormy evening in early spring, they arrived at the grand residence of Lady Isolde Kane. The mansion glowed with warm golden light, but the rain outside hammered against the tall windows like impatient fingers. Lady Isolde, elegant, sharp-eyed, and known in certain circles as the quiet keeper of London's most dangerous secrets, greeted them with a knowing smile. Briar moved through the crowd, as Ronan had taught her, exchanging pleasantries, while her ears strained for anything useful. She had just stepped away from a group of chattering matrons when she noticed a small side door slightly ajar. Inside, two men spoke in low, urgent tones. One of them was Lord Edmund Ashford, Ronan's uncle. Curiosity pulled her closer. She pressed herself against the wall, heart pounding, and listened. The Langford matter was handled cleanly, Edmund was saying, a satisfied edge in his voice. Old Henry was getting too close to exposing my dealings with the French agents. Spreading those documents was simple. The fool never saw it coming. Briar's blood turned to ice. Her father, innocent. The accusations, the public shame, the way her family had been torn apart, all of it orchestrated by the man standing only feet away. And worse. Edmund laughed softly. Ronan thinks he's clever using that girl as a shield, but she's just another pawn. Once she's served her purpose, we can dispose of the connection easily enough. Briar stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. Ronan had known. He had known the truth about her father from the very beginning, and he had said nothing. He had let her suffer, let her believe she was saving her family's honor, when all along he was using her pain as a weapon in his private war against his uncle. The room spun. She barely remembered leaving the mansion. By the time the carriage returned to Ashwood Manor, the rain had become a torrential downpour. Briar didn't wait for the footman. She pushed open the carriage door and ran straight into the garden, the cold rain soaking her instantly. Footsteps splashed behind her. Briar Ronan's voice cut through the storm. She whirled around, chest-heaving rain streaming down her face like tears. "You knew," she cried, her voice breaking. "You knew my father was innocent? You knew Lord Edmund was the one who destroyed him? And you said nothing." Ronan stopped a few paces away, water plastering his dark hair to his forehead. For the first time, his usual mask of control had cracked. His gray eyes held raw pain. "I couldn't tell you," he said, voice rough. "Not at the beginning. You were already broken by the trial. If I had revealed everything too soon, you might have refused me. You might have walked straight into Edmund's hands." Briar laughed bitterly, the sound swallowed by the rain. "So you used me? Like a pawn on your chessboard. You let me marry you, let me smile and dance, while carrying the weight of my father's false shame. All so you could get closer to your Uncle Ronan, took a step closer, rain dripping from his lashes. I needed you at my side to move through society without suspicion, but it stopped being just strategy weeks ago." His voice dropped, trembling slightly. "I kept the truth from you because I was terrified of losing you. The moment I saw you in that courtroom standing alone against the world, something in me shifted. I didn't want a tool anymore. I wanted you." Briar's heart twisted painfully. She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to. But the wound was too fresh, too deep. "You made me trust you," she whispered, voice cracking. "You made me start to feel something real. And all this time, you were hiding the one truth that could have given me back my father's honor sooner." Ronan reached for her, but stopped when she flinched. "I was wrong," he admitted, the words sounding as if they cost him everything. "I thought I could protect you by keeping you in the dark. I was afraid that if you knew how dangerous this game truly was, you would leave me." Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the raw vulnerability on his face. The powerful Duke of Ashwood stripped bare by rain and regret. Briar stood motionless in the downpour, her emerald gown clinging to her like a second skin. Rain mixed with the tears she could no longer hold back. In that moment, she realized the devastating truth. Her feelings for Ronan had grown far beyond their cold contract. She had begun to love the man behind the mask, the quiet strength, the rare moments of gentleness, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. But now, that love was tangled with betrayal. Her heart was breaking even as it reached for him. Briar lifted her face to the stormy sky, letting the rain wash over her. She no longer knew whether she was crying for her father, or for the fragile hope that had just shattered between her and the man standing only steps away. The Old Bailey was packed once again. This time, the air felt different, heavier, with anticipation instead of cruel judgment. Sunlight streamed through the high windows, catching dust motes like tiny sparks of hope. Briar stood tall on the witness stand, no longer the trembling girl from months ago. She wore deep sapphire silk, the color of quiet strength, and her hand rested lightly on the rail. Ronan's wedding ring glinted on her finger like a promise kept. The judge called the session to order. With steady breath, Briar began to speak. Her voice carried clearly through the silent courtroom as she laid bare everything she had discovered. She spoke of the forged documents, the whispered bribes, the calculated lies that had destroyed her father's name. Beside her, Dr. Elias Hawthorne presented medical evidence letters, records, and detailed notes proving that Ronan's older brother had been slowly poisoned. Lady Isolde Kane's network had supplied the missing financial trails, showing how Lord Edmund Ashford had funneled money to French agents while framing innocent men. Every word Briar spoke was a blow against the man who had tried to ruin her life. Lord Edmund sat at the defendant's table, his face growing paler with each revelation. His usual smug confidence cracked, then shattered completely when Briar looked directly at him. "You took my father from me," she said, her voice trembling with controlled emotion, but never breaking. You nearly destroyed my brother. You tried to use me as a pawn in your greed, but you forgot one thing. Some women refuse to stay broken. A stunned hush fell over the gallery. Then chaos erupted as the judge issued the order. Lord Edmund Ashford, you are under arrest for treason, murder, and conspiracy against the crown. Guards moved forward. Edmund lunged to his feet, shouting denials, but strong hands seized his arms. The sight of the once powerful man being dragged away in chains sent a ripple of justice through the room. Briar closed her eyes for a moment, letting the weight of the past months finally begin to lift. It was over. Later that evening, the fire crackled softly in the private sitting room at Ashwood Manor. Briar stood by the window, watching raindrops trace slow paths down the glass. The storm outside had passed, leaving the world washed clean. The door opened quietly. Ronan entered no longer wearing the formal coat of a duke, just a simple white shirt and dark trousers. He looked human, vulnerable in a way she had never seen before. He crossed the room slowly and without a word lowered himself to one knee in front of her. Briar's breath caught. "My love," he said, voice rough with feeling. "I come to you not as the Duke of Ashwood, but as a man who has made terrible mistakes. I hid the truth because I was terrified of losing you. I used our marriage as a shield when I should have offered you my heart from the very first day." He reached up and took her hands gently in his. "I am asking for a chance to begin again. No contracts, no secrets, no games of power. Only honesty, and the love I have carried for you since the moment I saw you standing alone in that courtroom, refusing to fall." Tears welled in Briar's eyes. She remembered the rain-soaked garden, the pain of betrayal, the slow bloom of feelings she'd tried so hard to deny. She remembered how safe she had begun to feel in his arms, even when everything else felt uncertain. "I accept," she whispered. Ronan's eyes searched hers, hopeful yet uncertain. "But there is one condition," she continued softly. "We will create something good from all this pain. A foundation, a charity that helps families destroyed by political lies and false accusations. No one else should suffer the way my father did, the way we almost did." A slow, genuine smile broke across Ronan's face, the first truly open smile she had ever seen from him. "Together," he said. "Always together." He rose to his feet and pulled her into his arms. The kiss they shared was tender, deep, and full of every unsaid word between them. Forgiveness, longing, and the quiet promise of a future they would build side by side. The next morning, just before dawn, they stood together on the wide stone balcony of Ashwood Manor. London stretched out below them, still wrapped in the soft haze of early light. The first rays of sunrise painted the sky in soft pinks and golds, chasing away the last shadows of night. Ronan's arm rested securely around Briar's waist. Her head leaned against his shoulder as they watched the city awaken. From a distance, two figures observed them quietly. Celine Ashford stood with a gentle smile, her eyes bright with happy tears. Beside her, Dowager Duchess Genevieve Ashford watched with a softened expression. For the first time in years, the stern lines of her face had relaxed into something almost warm. The older woman gave a small nod, as if finally approving the change that had come to her family. Briar looked up at Ronan, her heart full. "We survived the storm," she murmured. Ronan pressed a kiss to her temple, and found sunlight on the other side. Hand in hand, the Duke and Duchess of Ashwood faced the new day, no longer bound by contracts or shadows, but by a love that had been tested by fire and emerged stronger. This story reminds us that courage doesn't just save ourselves. It can bring justice and healing to many others, and that even the deepest betrayals can become the foundation for the truest love.